Welcome to today's episode of Attachment Theory in Action. I am pleased to have you here and listening. And today I am super excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Merideth Thompson. We are going to be diving into um, relationship limbo today. So, Dr. Meredith Thompson is a negotiation professor, a work-life researcher, and founder of Partner Lab, a decision support platform for relationships. She helps people cut through emotional noise, misplaced loyalty, and overthinking to get clear about what's actually working and what isn't. Her work is research-driven, direct, and designed to help people take responsibility for the lives they're building. We're going to have a very deep and open conversation, and I am really excited for you guys to listen in. Well, hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirsty. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too, me too. So I always start my podcast with the same question, and that question is, was there anything in your early life experiences or even perhaps early on in your career that has led you down this path and into the work that you're doing today and so on? Tell us a bit
Sure,
about your story.
sure. Frankly, I feel like where I am at and the work that I am doing really is the fruition or the synthesis of, especially my entire career, but much of my childhood as well.
Okay.
So I grew up in a household with a single mother who was not mentally well, and to the point where she was hospitalized at one point. I didn't know this until I was an adult, but shortly after my parents' divorce, she was hospitalized for, I think back then they called it a nervous breakdown, but she had threatened
Okay.
to hurt herself and my sister and I. And so the house money was always scarce, and she was one of those parents, she did the best she could, but you never knew what you were going to get with her. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of walking on eggshells. I was the oldest, and looking back, I can see how she kind of confided in me and relied on me in a way that's not helpful to children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's that. And then personally, the first time I married my high school sweetheart, and we were married for 22 years. And it was only until a few years after my divorce that I was like, oh my goodness, the first time I married my mother. And that's when I kind of started hearing things like that we try and, fix things that weren't working or heal wounds. And we, also gravitate towards what's familiar. And so
Mm-hmm.
I can look back and say, wow, that's a lot, I think, of what I was doing, and just didn't realize that was a thing, as they say. Um, and then over the last 9 years, I've been in a relationship with somebody I tell people I think I made him in a lab. And he has really helped me heal a lot of the attachment wounds from the first 43 years of my life.
Mm.
And so I'm taking a lot of lived experience into what I'm doing. But the other piece is my day job. I am a university professor. I teach negotiations, but my primary role is as a researcher, and I research how our work and non work and family lives kind of affect one another. And so I bring that to the table for sure. And so a few years ago, I was driving and listening to some podcast and just realized that I have access to the research, the relationship science that so many people don't because of, paywalled situations. And even if they had access to it, academic is research is written for other academics and not for,
Mm.
your mainstream reader. And so I just thought I have an opportunity to take the research, translate it so where people can actually use the findings in their life, and then bringing that lived experience also. And my first job out of in my early 20s was with one of the um, big five accounting firms at the time, and I was doing tech. And so I learned the tech side of things. So I feel like all that is really coming together to motivate and equip me to build Partner Lab, which is right now focused primarily on people who feel stuck in their romantic relationships. And stuck, I've started calling it relationship limbo. where we kind of
Mm,
have one foot in and one foot out. We can't decide, is this the right relationship for me? Is it not? Um, and we're focusing on that, I think, for two primary reasons. One, I was stuck in that for like the last 10 or 12 years of my first marriage. And I don't want anybody to go through that if they don't have to.
hmm
And then two, if we determine we can't have a great relationship unless one, we figure out what we want to improve or change in our current relationship, or decide that that one needs to come to an end so that we can move on. And if we wish, find another relationship that actually serves us and makes us healthy and happy. So I feel like it's all working together. I feel like I'm doing what I have been called to do. And I tell my team, like, we're doing sacred work. It may not feel like it sometimes because it can be a slog, but I think we're doing sacred work.
I would absolutely agree with you. And I am also a believer in I don't even know that it's fate, but that or it's that the universe lines up and you if you look hard enough, you do find that you are where you're supposed to be. But hearing
Mm-hmm,
your
mm-hmm,
story really does come to my mind. Firstly, thank you for sharing some of your story.
mm-hmm.
Um, and and then thank you for using your story to support others in their journey of healing. I mean, it's one thing to really be able to heal or at least be on a healing journey in your own story, but then to be able to support others is really wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and I'm going to veer a little bit because this wasn't in our original questions, and
Sure.
but sharing a little bit that I grew up with a dad who had mental health issues growing up,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
um, for me, it wasn't until again that I started working in this that I really thought about how did that impact me as a
mm-hmm.
child, as a young person, and then how does it still impact me as I show up in relationships. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate your kind of reflection on that. Was there, would you say, was there a turning point for you before the end of your first marriage? Or would you say that was maybe the turning point where you kind of thought, I need to learn more about this? Or was that already
Mhm.
kind of happening?
Um, I think in my 20s and 30s, I was able to kind of look back on my childhood and go, oh, this what happened here, that was not a good thing. That was unhealthy, and how it shaped me. I, frankly, I don't think I really knew or understood how attachment kind of played a role in all of that. Um, and until, yeah, probably after my divorce, so like mid 40s. And, it's been more of mainstream conversation, I think, over the last 10 years. And the more I've learned,
Mhm.
the more I was like, oh, now I understand, how these things relate. And so I don't think there was really necessarily a turning point in my marriage. It was after. And I
Mhm.
think, at least in my situation, um, I had to get out of that relationship so that I would have the space physically, mentally, emotionally to actually do some introspection.
Mhm.
My first spouse was, if I got a book on psychology, even though I was a psych major in undergrad, if I got a book on psychology and a sort of self help, that was like verboten in the household, and so I
Mhm.
probably would have felt compelled to hide it, and that's not super conducive to introspection and growth, especially if you can't really talk about it with somebody important to you.
Mhm. And we're going to get to that, your idea about clarity. We'll get to that further into the podcast because I would love to hear a bit more about that. Um, oh my goodness. My chain of thought is gone because my brain is just like processing everything that you were talking about.
No worries. I do the same thing these days. I don't know what it is.
I was thinking about you had mentioned that that turning point didn't come until kind of afterwards. And oh my goodness, this never happens to me. My listeners are gonna find this hilarious because I'm always like continuously talking. Um, Oh man. So, okay. I'm gonna regulate myself and get
Mhm,
back into this space. Um, Many people, I think, the term trauma, developmental trauma, complex trauma is now trauma informed is now being used a lot.
mhm,
And your comments about uh, you didn't, I didn't really think about how much this impacted me. And then I realized, okay, maybe this did impact me, but I didn't realize the attachment piece so much. So I
mm,
think that there
mhm,
is this more of a growing trend now that people are recognizing that trauma experiences that happen earlier on in life or in their younger years do impact us and stay with us, but
mhm,
the attachment piece is still missing. And that's what
mm,
I
mhm,
can boast about the work that I do is that we bring the attachment piece in because
mhm,
it sounds like you were able to recognize, yeah, this wasn't a normal experience in childhood, a healthy experience in childhood.
mhm,
But it took extra work to get to a point where you were able to say, and now this is showing up in my adult relationships. Like, I didn't know that
mhm.
that would happen. Like, how did we
Right.
get from here to here? Like, okay, I've reached a part of maybe a point of closure or acceptance, but it's still
Mhm.
showing up. Like, what's going on? I think a lot of people don't make that connection.
Action. I absolutely agree. And one thing that I think helped me to start connecting them is seeing, and I think I in some ways do this kind of instinctively because it's the way my research brain works, is I'm looking for patterns. And so I've
Mm,
really started to do that. And I think that's what really helped me build a much healthier relationship with my partner now, was looking back at patterns of interaction and codependency with my mother, and then seeing very similar patterns of interaction and codependency with my first spouse, and just being able to clock or recognize those patterns and go, okay, not we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to figure out kind of a different path. And one of the ways I think about that is, I think it can be overwhelming when we're looking at something meaningful like that or a big decision. It's like it's just so heavy. You're like, and I think it can be we can be inclined to kind of push away either taking action or making a decision. And so I've started really looking at things in my life and with clients as, let's try this experiment. And
hmm
so taking little steps or having a little experiment for like a week and see what happens. And I know that's definitely the way, or one of the ways I rebuilt trust with myself after my divorce, because I was super low self-trust. And so even little small financial decisions, even though I made most of the income in our relationship, he controlled it. And
hmm
so I just had very little experience doing that. And so with each little decision, it's like, oh, hey, the sky didn't fall down. Okay, what's next? But looking for
hmm
those patterns in interactions and in relationships, and especially with regard to, I think, dependency and boundaries, has been transformative for me.
I love that you talk about patterns and also that you talk about it from kind of this research experiment like language
Mm,
because I remember first learning about attachment and it's just so it floats around, right? I mean, you can't see it. I mean, I you can see it
you can,
if you know what you're looking for, you can see it.
yes, sure.
But outside of our bubble of folks that understand it, it's really hard to wrap your head around. It's a
Hmm.
concept, right? That
Hmm.
comes up in these interactions that, again, if you don't know what you're looking for, you just don't know.
Hmm.
Because in a healthy upbringing, it comes so naturally. It should come naturally, right? And so
Yeah.
people aren't necessarily looking for it. And so I love that some of your approach includes really looking for the science and the data points and
Hmm.
the patterns as you're calling it to
Hmm.
make it more accessible for people. And you mentioned earlier too about, the research and the academia is really it's not for people that aren't in this field, right?
Hmm.
We joked about this when we talked before in preparation for this, that, the way that I would read a journal article now is so different to, if somebody said, "Hey, I need you to read and take some points from this," my goodness, I wouldn't know where to start or be so
Mm,
overwhelmed. So
sure.
I love that you and your team are doing the work to bring this information to people that wouldn't normally have like access to it or an understanding
Mm.
of it.
Yes, yeah. I think that's fundamental. It is fundamental to what we do, and in part to why we do what we do, because so much research, especially, is funded by state governments, federal governments, things like that. And why shouldn't everyone have access to what that research says, or what the implications might be for people's lives? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's super important. There's plenty of woo-woo stuff out there, and people have opinions and they have commentary. But yeah, I firmly believe that let's ground the conversation in what the data actually say, so that people know what it says, and then they can make decisions, with that in mind.
Hmm. And I want to backtrack a little bit to there's a couple of things that you were talking about. One is this what you found. And I love your honesty and vulnerability. Like I married my mother, right? I
I did.
just,
I didn't know it, but I did.
you know, um, and I think again, that's something that people really struggle with understanding about attachment is that when we have these insecure experiences, we end up seeking out partners that validate the feeling
Hmm.
that we have inside of us.
Yes.
And that because it doesn't make sense to people. And so, it's really hard for folks to understand that. And this whole kind of mentality of, well, why would you go to that person if they're doing the same thing to you or if they're hurting you or harming you? And um,
Hmm.
it runs so much deeper than that.
Very much so. Yes. Yes. When I came to that realization, it was in my brain almost continually for several days, like, how did that happen, and why did I do that? And I think part of it was the familiarity. It's like, oh well, this is the way close relationships are. They're super inconsistent, and you never know when somebody is going to fly off the handle, and
Hmm.
just be super unpleasant to be around for no apparent reason. Or also, the undermining was a huge thing. It continued to be until my mother passed away just about 6 months ago. But like, after I finished my PhD, she was like, "I didn't think you could do it." And I was like, "Oh,
Hmm.
gee, thanks."
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
wasn't sure I could do it either, but here we are. And
Hmm.
so I think, the patterns of behavior, the undermining, just a lot of it was familiar. And I think I just thought this is the way it was. And actually, I started recognizing that it could be different. Um, and it's one of the things that helped me decide it was time to end that marriage. Is I started having just interactions with men in the church that I went to at that time, just like seeing them on Sunday and chatting or whatever. And I was like, I feel better about myself after having interactions with these people who I don't really know, and they don't really know me, and they're not super deep, but they're not superficial conversations either. And I thought, I feel more comfortable and loved by them than I do by my spouse. And so
Hmm.
that, seeing those different patterns there, also kind of woke me up, I think,
Hmm.
and helped me recognize, yeah, the situation I was actually in.
And I know that your work focuses primarily on, spousal or partner relationships, but
Mhm.
I get the feeling that, and maybe in the future, maybe you're already
Mhm.
thinking about this, but a lot of what the work that you're doing could also be applied to an adult child and parent relationship whereby
Mm.
there are, challenges with attachment to that figure and
Mhm.
boundary challenges and so on.
Mhm.
Would you agree?
I think so. I think so. I think there are actually a lot of relationships this could apply to, including parent-child, especially adult child and parent. maybe also teenagers. They're their own unique situation. I also think of it as applying to the workplace because a lot of my early research was on um, abusive bosses. And what we
Mm,
learned through that time and time again is people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And
mm,
so, like helping people, and then, sometimes our friendships are even can be fraught for various reasons. People change and communication can go poorly, and you're like, oh, I don't know, is this relationship, this friendship serving me? Is it serving the other person? So I think there's a potential for us to branch out, absolutely, and apply some of the similar concepts to other close relationships. Absolutely.
mm. Well, and I'm glad that you brought up the kind of the boss situation and so on, because some of my conversations recently on the podcast have been about attachment theory really throughout the entire system. I mean, we're all in
Mm-hmm.
relationship with each other, right? And so
Right.
it's going to come up in one form or
Mm-hmm.
another. Um, so that's just neat that you brought that up. So the I wanted to, we've talked a little bit, you've mentioned a little bit about Partner Lab, and how some of the work that you do. Tell us just a little bit more about where that started for you, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of some of the goals.
Mm-hmm. It started for me initially looking at how I could help people date better because I personally I took a very not on the front end. It was kind of hit or miss on the front end when I re-entered the dating pool at 43. Um, and I got pretty kind of I don't know if scientific is the right word, but I kind of treated it like a research project. And I really do think like how we date and what I learned both from the research and in my own experience is really important. um, but at that same point in time, I also had a few friends in my circle who were kind of stuck in that relationship limbo in their relationship. And I just kind of yearned for them to either have a better experience in their relationship or like move on. Um, and that's where I kind of took a step back and said, okay, let's focus more on first helping people get clarity in their present relationship, either making it better, getting to a healthier, happier spot, or I think it's important to put a time frame on that, and both people have to be game to put forth effort. One-sided effort just that's to me that's a non-starter, and so really focusing on helping people get out of relationships that perhaps are not serving them to make that decision because I
Mm,
just don't want anybody else to stay stuck in that ambivalence, and so um, it kind of evolved into shifting away from helping people date better to helping people first get clarity in the relationship they're in. And my goal over time is to build it into helping people throughout, I guess you could call it the life cycle of relationships,
mm,
um, dating, getting more committed, um, having children is a massive impact on the relationship, especially after the first child is born. You can see it in a graph. And then when you experience that, you're like, whoa, this is what they were talking about. It's like,
yes.
the data is not lying, but man, couldn't somebody have, prepared you more for that? Like it's just going to rock your world. And so, yeah, I have seen and experienced such a profound impact on my life from finding and cultivating the right partnership. And
Mm,
I know I'd like it's had an impact on my career. I've done a TED talk. I've started a coaching business. I've written a book, like things that in my prior relationship would not have been supported, would have been like a complete non-starter. And
mhm,
so, yeah, I know the impact both from my experience, but then also from my research job, that it's the most important relationship we have for good or for
mhm,
bad.
mhm.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that I want to dive into a bit with you is, y- and I'm just going to say some of what we've talked about so far maybe feels a little bit on the attack mode of
Mm,
the other person,
mm,
like, um, but from what I know of what you've told me so far and in our previous conversation, that actually it's not about going and blaming somebody else. It's
Hmm.
about, and to use your words, kind of moving towards this clarity.
Hmm.
And so tell us a little bit about kind of the self work that you do with
Mm,
clients or even that you maybe done yourself.
sure, sure. Um, well, yes, to me, it does start with self-reflection, and there's kind of a process and a framework that we use that we call the clarity matrix that helps people understand, and it's got four quadrants. So there's where they contribute to the relationship in a positive way, where they contribute to the relationship in a harmful or negative way, and then the flip side is how does their partner contribute, or what's outside of their control is really the
Hmm.
way we frame it. Because I think a lot of people think, well, if I, and I know I did, if I just do X, then my partner will do Y and things will be better. But darn it, we cannot control other people.
Hmm.
And even
Hmm.
trying, like it's a waste of our time, energy, and attention. And so understanding what they don't have control or influence over that's either helping or harming the relationship. And so I think a lot of times people in unhappy relationships or stuck in that relationship limbo blame the partner. The partner becomes the enemy.
Hmm.
And I try and ease them off of that. Like, your partner's not the enemy. Your indecision, that's the enemy, because
Hmm.
that's what's keeping you stuck. We can only influence our partners so much. Um, and trying to think that we can control the other person is not helpful, and it's not healthy. And so
Hmm.
getting them to see where they're contributing in a positive way, but also in a negative way, and develop a plan. And sometimes it is that experiment. Okay, so if I want to stop X behavior, whether it's nagging my partner or um, saying that yes, sure, I'd love pizza for dinner, even though I already said I wanted Mexican, and my partner's like, no, I want pizza, and you're like, okay, are you self-sabotaging, or you're denying your needs? Like, you're not going to get what you want all the time, but recognizing where we're contributing to the harmful dynamics, because I think especially for those who decide this relationship is not serving me and move on, they're going to repeat those patterns again,
Hmm.
somewhere else. And
Hmm.
so recognizing what they're bringing and going, okay, let's develop a plan, or at least an experiment for how we can change that behavior. I think that's super important. So accountability, that's another thing I think is really important, is accountability. And what I tell people is, like, accountability is sexy.
Hmm.
Like, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's willing to be accountable, darn, you're safe, and you can come to them with, like, an issue that's bothering you, or something in the relationship you feel like it's not working, and they're not going to go off. They're going to be accountable, and you're going to figure it out together. So
Hmm.
that's that. Self accountability, I think, it's generally where we start, and knowing themselves, knowing what their deal breakers are, things like that.
And how often does that conversation would do you feel like go into the depths of attachment? Like how much does that show up for some of the clients that
Mm,
you've worked with?
yes. Yeah. Great question. The way we talk about it with clients is that, and looking at how their attachment activation may distort their reality, or distort the clarity that they have. And so, when they're stuck in that relationship limbo, a lot of times their attachment systems do get activated. And so when that happens, a lot of times there's like a shift in their perception of risk. And so
Hmm.
anxious activation just grows that abandonment risk, and then avoidant activation amplifies kind of like, I'm locked in risk, or I'm feeling suffocated. And so that's one of the things we focus on, is helping them to determine, well, first to just kind of slow down and make some attempts to regulate, but to separate the activation from the data. And so, and that data may be patterns. Is this the only relationship where this happens? Is it like this all the time? And so, helping them recognize those patterns without being, I think, defeatist about it.
Mm-hmm.
If these are patterns and they're behavioral patterns, then it's something we can change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At least they're half of it in the relationship.
Yeah, and does that sometimes lead to, okay, before we can move forward with moving from a place of limbo, we have to almost go backwards for a while and we have to really get to
Mm,
the root of where this behavior pattern has come from for you
hmm
in order to then be able to address the current situation. Unless, of course, that there's a safety issue or, something like that. Does
right,
does that
right.
often happen? Does that sometimes happen?
I would say it happens. I'm going to say it probably at least 80% of the time. That's a really good question. I'll
Mm,
have to pay more attention to that. But I think for a lot of people, um, that's part of the conversation because, and a lot of times it doesn't start that way. But when we start helping them with pattern recognition,
hmm
I'll, I wouldn't say, yeah, I don't know that I would say every time, but most of the time, something will come up that it's like, okay, you're seeing that a pattern here. Think back. How far back does that go? Are there other areas in your life where you've seen that? And it's. I think sometimes it's a path to get there because a lot of people don't think about like how your relationship with your parents or your what went on in your household. Like seriously, that's affecting me in my 40s, but it can
hmm
be, and it'll affect us more if we're not aware of it. Like that's a lot of what we focus on. We're not therapists. We're not in the business of treating attachment wounds, but developing the client's awareness of the thread that kind of may go through all of these relationships.
Mm-hmm. So that then they could go out and seek their own more deeper, probably
Right.
therapy level
Yep.
to get to that point.
Exactly.
Love that.
Exactly.
Love that. Um, so kind of moving forward a little bit, I want to talk to you about, you call this like relationship limbo, right?
hmm
And some people may say, well, you just need to leave the relationship. Others may say you
mm
need to stick in it. Like, how do you approach that?
Mm,
And you've mentioned it a little bit, but just give
sure.
us more information.
Well, it kind of depends on the situation. So, in especially if a client is looking for a speedier answer, which some people are, and I think a lot of people are looking for answers that their body already knows, and
Mm-hmm.
their mind, their brain just has not caught up. I
Mm-hmm.
also think about some of the tools that we offer as being regret insurance, because they think like I should probably end this relationship or get that divorce. But they're like, oh, we have kids together. Like, what about that? I don't want to quote blow up my life. And so we have one tool that will be launched within the next 3 to 4 days that is a very specific, direct recommendation as to whether someone should stay or go. Or there's also a third category. They stay with conditions, but putting a time around that and like having this understanding of like these things have to change for a longer period of time than just like 2 to 5 weeks or something. Um, and so for people who are looking for something quicker, we have that. And that's all grounded in relationship science that shows these 5 or 6 factors that have the biggest influence on relationship quality and health and satisfaction. And so that's where we're pulling that to. For others, they want maybe a deeper dive and they want more self reflection. And then we've got a 7 workshop program called the Clarity Circle that takes them through that clarity matrix and helps them understand. And I think we tend to get more people in that who aren't necessarily in the should I stay or go exactly. Like they haven't maybe asked themselves that question yet, but they're like, things are not going great. And I don't want this to go down an even more unhappy path. And so they're ready and willing to do more self reflection. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also grounded in the research, but they're gonna have to ask themselves some really hard questions and be willing to do the work that helps them identify what they need, how to ask for those needs, how to have a conversation with their partner that is direct but also curious. I think
Hmm.
sometimes we're
Hmm.
like, well, my partner needs to change. I've seen a clip of Michelle Obama recently where she was like, in early days, she um, dragged her husband, as she said, to therapy. She was like, I'm going to get the therapist to fix you. And then she realized, oh, whoops, there's some things I need to work on too. And so, um, that's a piece of what we do as well.
Hmm. I love that you, to put it so very simply, have almost two options, right? Because yeah, you will have people who are kind of like, I just need to know if I'm making the right choice, and I need something to help me make that, choice very quickly, and so on.
Hmm.
And I think about perhaps people, like you said, if there's children involved who really, or even just people who process differently,
Hmm.
who need to take more time over it. And I personally cannot make an assumption very well, but I think I'm going to say that perhaps neither option is wrong. It's
Hmm.
what you feel is right for you in your situation.
Hmm.
But I do love that it's all built on relationship science and that it's not just, you know, um, thrown together based on, a few things that people know. Like this is
Hmm.
rooted in scientific evidence, as you've talked
Yep.
about,
Yep.
loving the research, which God bless you
Hmm.
because I like people that deal with the data. I don't want to deal with the data. I just want to know what comes
Really?
from the
So
data.
fun. See, I'm the opposite. I in my work life, when I get a new data set, it's like, oh yes, let's go find out what else we're gonna learn. Yeah, I'm a dork. But yeah, so it's yes, grounded in relationship science, not just some lady from Utah's thoughts about the world. Because yeah, why not? The research is there. Let's use it. And it's
Mhm.
a lot of it's taxpayer funded. So yeah, let's capitalize on that.
So let's wrap up. I want to ask you just, you've mentioned the word clarity for a few times. We've mentioned it.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you in your work that you're doing with clients or with the data?
That's a great question. I I think about clarity again, research brain, kind of in statistics or percentages. So can we help someone get to 80% ish certainty about the decision that they're making, whether that's stay or go or stay with conditions? 80% confidence level or certainty. And so that's one of the things we're developing along with our tools is kind of measuring the clarity as people go along so that they can
Hmm.
see like I am in a better spot. I have more clarity this month than I did last month because I've been doing the work that looks like X, Y, or Z. And so that's kind of my approach and how I think about it. I think it's rare, even in some really harmful situations. Like there's so much to think about. There's if there's kids involved, and a lot of times if they are in an unsafe relationship, they don't have control of the money. So they're like, if I leave, then what? We're going to be homeless. Like, how does that work? And so getting people to 80 or 85% clarity or confidence about, and that's part of our tagline: clarity, confidence, hope. In that order.
Hmm.
You can't have confidence until you have the clarity.
Hmm.
And so helping people get to that point, because I think once they get there and start taking steps towards whatever action they've decided to take, 100% clarity a lot of times will show up further down that path. Like I knew in my brain and in my body that getting divorced or ending my first marriage was the right thing to do, but it wasn't until probably 6 months later, a year later, where I look back and I'm like, yes, that was the right thing to do.
Hmm.
It's the hardest decision I have ever made in my entire life. It is also at least one of the top three best decisions I've made.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so getting people to that kind of 80 or 85% clarity, that's our goal.
And I love how you just kind of explained that because I could hear from what you were saying on your journey that shift from the clarity of the decision making and going back to what you said about indecision is the enemy, right? And
Mhm.
then moving to after a while, then the confidence appeared, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Again, I'm not in your work, but I feel like that's normal. Like you get clarity, but you're not necessarily going to feel confident right away. Like
Hmm.
that's going to keep coming,
Hmm.
and it's going to happen down the line. And then with that confidence that you now have because of that clarity and that decision that you've made and followed through on, now there's hope for your future that
Hmm. Exactly.
it doesn't have to be repeated. Um,
Yes. Yes. And that's one thing I harp on it with clients and with friends and anybody who will listen is the lens through that kind of says inaction breeds anxiety, action breeds
mhm,
confidence. And, it's super simple, but my goodness, it is true. And so, by staying stuck in that indecision or that the relationship limbo, people are just growing in anxiety. And and if we can help them decide, I'm going to take a step forward in this relationship to make it better, and I'm going to see if my partner is willing to meet me there to do the same thing or take steps to end it, either way, their confidence will grow because they're taking action instead of just staying stuck. And one thing I've learned recently is that when we're stuck in that relationship indecision, and I can look back and see this in my own life. Some experts call it we experience financial leakage. And so, because we're so unhappy and we're stuck, we spend money on things that to like make us feel better or to make things look better
mhm,
from the outside. Like one of my collaborators, she said she has several friends who have eventually did get divorced, but each of them was looking at having breast augmentation to like make the relationship better.
wow.
I went on a big holiday trip like 6 months before my divorce, and I think we were trying to figure out a way to make things better, make the relationship better, be happier. I think we bought the last house my spouse and I bought. I now call it the stupidly big house. It was ridiculous for three people. It was just stupid. And you know what? The couple that bought it from us when we sold it in the divorce, like 3 years later, they got divorced. So it's like, we tend to like, we're either trying to make ourselves feel better or we're trying to, and it could be and or trying to signal to the world everything's fine. Like when
Mm,
my first spouse and I split, people were like stunned. But if they'd been in the house and seen the interactions, they would have said, "Oh gosh, they should have done that a long time ago."
mhm,
And so, staying in indecision, it comes at a cost, and we think it's like just between us and our partner at the time, but it's not. Our my boys picked up on stuff that I thought we were hiding. We were not hiding it well because kids have that radar, and so staying in that relationship limbo has numerous costs that I think a lot of times we overlook.
mhm, mhm. Well, Meredith, oh my goodness, this conversation has been fantastic.
Same.
And I really appreciate kind of just a different take on, we talked about attachment and attachment theory, but we talked about a lot of other factors too, and the slightly different take that your team is going forward with this. I really like it, and I love again that it is grounded in science and the
Mm,
theory behind it. So I just thank you for coming and sharing some
thank
of your
you.
personal journey as well with our listeners and then sharing the great work that you're doing. I am very thankful for having this
Oh,
opportunity.
oh, thank you. Me too. You're giving me a lot to think about, and this conversation has about how we can incorporate some more attachment lenses into what we're doing. Because I think it's super important. Yeah.
Well,
So
that's
thank you.
great. That is
Yeah.
great. Awesome. Well, hopefully, well, maybe we'll see you on here again for another episode.
I hope so. I would love that. Thanks so much, Kirsty.
You're welcome.